I used to do auditing, and recently I created E0x, which is a development and testing framework for Solidity. And these days I do Solidity teaching, coaching, mentoring, trying to get into podcasting, and working on E0x. What about you guys? Saša, you want to go on it?
Sure. I guess the summary is I'm a dev in the crypto blockchain space. Specifically, some of the things I've done in the past, I was an early employee of Gauntlet Networks as a data scientist. And I was one of the co-founders of API 3. And now I mostly work on some personal projects and consulting and stuff like that. Nothing public yet, but that's kind of, the overview.
It's kind of funny. Saša and I kind of like swapped a Gauntlet. The day that she was leaving was the day that was starting. So,
Nice.
Which is kind of like it was like a week or something like that. So I'm also, it's not early, but it's like, for some reason, they still consider us OG Gauntlet. So I was a Gauntlet as an engineer, manager.
Depends on how many shares you got.
What's up?
Definition of early is how many shares you got.
I guess.
Right.
Yeah, it was just pre-next jump in the share price, and so I guess I was there at the right time. But and I got to shape a lot of the company because I was to wear many different hats. So I'm a software engineer, but I've been working as a data engineer, as a DevOps, as a smart contract engineer. I recently left, and I'm building an AI data platform, and we can talk about that later.
Do you want to talk about your platform?
So the company is called Etna Labs, and that's like an umbrella for experimenting with AI and with like crypto and data. And there's a ton of brainstorming. Yeah, Etna Labs. I have a website that is etnalabs.io. I'm still it's a placeholder. You'll find only the company name. That's it. And as I'm thinking, I have in front of me a whiteboard with a lot of post-its. And in this board, you'll read things like a command line tool to analyze folder contents and expand on projects. Has nothing to do with data, and has to do with refactoring repository using AI. And then there's other one like Clear Aggregator Daily Summary, which is the one we're talking with Saša the other day. I'm trying to do to use AI to get the daily summary of my Twitter feed because it's too noisy, and I trying to reduce that. And so it's a lot of it kind of started from a lot of different direction. The common denominator here is the data ingestion. And so all these different apps, they all need data. And that's what it was in also Gauntlet, pulling data.
Last I talked to you about this, it was a data ingestion for some sort of a blockchain application, no? Did you pivot from there? Yeah, so I feel like it might be a little bit interesting to go through the history of what you were, because it's kind of you were doing something similar at Gauntlet, then you wanted to sort of take that and focus on data ingestion more generally, and now it seems to have pivoted to AI, so it might be interesting to...
Yeah, why all these people think... Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to go through the story. So when I joined Gauntlet, I work on this project called Auto Government, where basically at Gauntlet I need to give a small pitch actually first about what Gauntlet is. So and Saša, you can feel free to correct me, although we pivot so many times there that probably I have the most updated one.
You should also get paid for shilling Gauntlet so much.
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Besides our share, they're awesome. Yeah. Tarun is amazing. Ray is awesome. So everyone there is fantastic. So
yeah, I only have good things to say about Gauntlet.
So I joined Gauntlet, and the first thing I was working on was the AutoGov, which basically... Well, sorry, I take a step back. We were talking about what is Gauntlet. So as the last speech is a data risk, it's a risk analysis company for DeFi. So DeFi platform can lending and access. Every time there's a market movement, they are a risk of liquidations. And what Gauntlet does is analyze this platform, analyze the market, and then suggest changes of the parameters to keep this platform stable. Like a bank and Moody. So if the market change, they have to buy more bonds or less bonds. They have to change like the interest rate and stuff like that. Basically same thing. So I was working on this process of pulling the data, transforming the data, running ETLs, and then sending the recommendation on chain using like for Balancer, for example, we did like using Gnosis Safe for a multi-sig contract for sending this stuff. Yes, please.
Can you talk about what, like, if it's not proprietary, can you talk about what the data was and what the source was? Is this like blockchain kind of index data, or is there anything off chain as well?
Yes. And by the way, Saša, I love this question. Please keep sending them, because I will tend to like diverge a lot in this conversation. So I'm happy to get narrow again on the topic. I'm the
official question asker of the podcast.
Yeah, of course. And I'll do the same with you guys after. So the main source of data, because what we're interested in was like prices and all the balances and liquidity and volume of these tokens. We were ingesting, basically the data is all different sources. Can be snapshot of DeFi pools. So like sushi swap pools, balancer pools, and compound, etc. So, and getting all these pools, especially for the DEXs, then in the data pipeline going down, we can calculate the DEX prices, which this is interesting. So the DEX price, it's basically a relation between, in a pool, there's two tokens, token A and token B. And in theory, it's whatever the difference is that makes the price. In practice, because there's centralized prices like CoinGecko and other APIs that offer those, and there's like centralized exchanges, generally the price tends to be the same because there's some arbitrage put that together again back to the same price. But anyway, and I'm diverging again here.
Wait. So are you saying you guys didn't consider off-chain prices because it's essentially the same as on-chain?
We did consider both. So we're ingesting both prices from CoinGecko, from Amber Data. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I feel like I wonder if this conversation ever happened at Gauntlet, but like on-chain data is like the price only updates per block, so it's much slower than like off-chain is real time. So I was wondering if somehow the discrepancy could be taken in account in risk.
Yes.
I mean that's a big math function. I don't know, but I wonder if that was ever brought up.
Yeah, it was brought up because we were thinking also to analyze mempool data. But at the end of the day, that kind of data is so reactive and so fast that proposal take 2 weeks anyway, so it didn't matter. So going at, to be honest, even at the block speed is too much, because it really, at the end of the day, really, it's every 2 weeks that you do these changes. And so if the price move in a second, there's not reactivity where you can change the parameters. And so we were ingesting by the block, and that's mostly for all the EVM chain that we were working with. Also other EVM chain, possibly, because it makes sense like to have all this data anyway. And then we created these like downstream, we had these decentralized prices. Other data that we were ingesting, it's like all the pools, like volumes, and that was calculated, the balances, and then also accounts balances and other stuff like that helps to get all this data that then gets fed into the models, and then the models send it to the simulation, and the simulation then it's really the black box is the simulation, and it's where all the magic happens. And yeah, you probably work on some of the models, So you might know what happened in those models. For me, also the models were black box. But yeah. So
just to summarize, you were mainly using Geth, like historical on-chain transactions included in a block, as opposed to, for example, the CoinGecko API.
Both, and we initially used the Web3 Pi, and with Web3 Pi, basically we're calling EVM RPC to ingest from the smart contracts their statuses, so to get the balances like in a pool. And the thing with Web3 Pi though is that it's really slow because it doesn't implement batching. Yeah, and so what's interesting is that I had to build this library called EVM RPC, which basically was load balancing the code between all different RPC providers, Infura, Alchemy, and other ones, for a few reasons: to go faster, cost, and also resiliency, because sometimes they go down. And the other cool thing is the RPC API in the archive nodes already implements batching. So batching is not implemented at the client level, it's implemented at the server level. And so Web3 Pi doesn't implement it because it doesn't implement it. Web3.js does. And so I had to build this EVM RPC that batch the call in whatever limit every archive node has. And so we could call like 1,000 RPC calls at once. And so that allows us to scale. But going back to your question, sorry. Yeah, we ingested all different type of sources. Web3 data and order book data. And we were planning to ingest all other stuff. But I don't want to go too much into the details because I'm not 100% sure what's the line between can be shareable. All this stuff I think is shareable because we wrote blog posts about it, but I don't want to, I'll stop before the line.
Yeah. Also, like my next, if we want to continue the conversation, so I have a good sense of what you were doing at Gauntlet now. So like, if you can get into like, what was the kind of key idea, like I want to take this further or generalize it or like specialize it. I'm actually not entirely, I can't remember specifically how you took that work and into a new project.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, the main, the butter, I guess, of Gauntlet is the data, ingesting the data. And what surprised me is that we had to build in-house a lot of those machinery because there's not really a tool that lets you do all these data pipeline easily in one, like you declare what you want, you just get it. There's nothing like that. And so we were using Kubeflow, which is a machine learning data ingestion pipeline. Actually, let me stay on focus here because if we go into the Kubeflow path, we can go another.
No, we can go into the Kubeflow path. I'm curious. I'm interested.
Yeah. So every startup who works with data needs to ingest data in some way. And this is part of what a data engineer does, maintaining the infrastructure for writing this data architecture. And the infrastructure is like all the infrastructure like cloud, Google Cloud Platform, AWS, or whatever. And then on top of that layer, the next layer is like I'll say the orchestration of the containers of the servers, so Kubernetes. And then there are two different ways usually companies do that. It's either they just manually create data pipeline with queues. So you ingest data and that data gets sent through queue to another server, and the server does something. Usually they're all containers and they do something. And so there's tools like Celery, Luigi, and other stuff like that that do that. And then there's another way that is like all at once data pipeline manager, like data Airflow, Kubeflow, Airflow. There's Dataflow. There's many, Apache Beam. There's so many that we can. On top of my head, I probably don't remember them. But the point is, you declare a DAG, so a decentralized, not decentralized, sorry.
Directed acyclic graph.
Yes, thank you. So you
Centralized DAG.
the decentralized DAG, yes. Actually, that could be the pivot. Yes, that's interesting. I'll explore that. So, and you have all these like upstream data, and you just create these DAG, and then at the end you run what you need to run. Okay, so and yeah, so usually a company builds this thing, and there isn't a buy version of this. Well, there wasn't. And the other piece in this data ingestion is also ingesting data from Web3. It's even more niche and more, there's even less product to do that, and it's pretty complex. As you can imagine, to ingest Web3 data, you need to know a bunch of different things that include addresses, contracts, there's a bunch of stuff that you need to know there. You guys work in Web3 as well, so you understand a lot of that. And so I saw an opportunity because I talking with other friends, they're all also in crypto, they all have the same problem. They all built the same thing in-house at different scale. Gauntlet, the scale with Kubeflow is like pretty big. And in other companies, they built maybe a Node.js script that does this thing. But then they're running the same problem that we run, which is API limits. So Alchemy give a limit at some point.
Why aren't you guys just running your own node?
Yeah, because we have way too many EVM to pull from, and we consider that, but it's maintaining nodes it's like running archive nodes. Well, you need to sync them. You need to have multiple of them, because if one dies, then you need to have the other ones. Okay. I think at some point Gauntlet will have to, but it needs a team just to do that, I think, or at least one person focus on that. But it might be actually at some point it might be the solution, because Alchemy is freaking expensive. It's very expensive, and actually it's fun. It's something to talk about here that you'll find interesting. Alchemy give you a free tier, and so in the free tier, I think you can get 1 million call a month or something like that, which is a pretty sizable number. And if you run over the number, then you have a $40 a month for 2 million, I think. And then if you run over that, you start paying a crazy amount of money. So they kind of created this incentive.
How much was Gauntlet paying for Alchemy? If that's something you can share, like what was, I'm guessing they were doing like professional top tier.
Yeah, I don't think I can share that actually.
Okay, that's fine.
I can't.
Go ahead.
No, I can share that I reduced that by 60 or 70% with the EVM RPC.
Oh, okay.
Because we're round robin between different ones, but.
Because if I was in that position, I would like weigh the trade-off of paying for Alchemy versus paying someone a salary to maintain a node. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it wasn't that high to pay someone. Okay. It was, the threshold was like definitely not even close to consider that. And I think actually in retrospect, I talked with other people that pay almost the same as what we were paying in companies that Gauntlet is like a unicorn. It's like $1 billion company with $1 billion of revenue.
Yeah.
And companies that are much smaller, they still kind of like were close to what we were paying for some reason, or half of what we were paying, which is like still.
Okay.
So the Alchemy forces you almost to create multiple accounts so that you use the free tier, and you get like 5-10 million you can pull 5-10 million like transaction calls, and they're free instead of like paying a bunch. So there's a lot of tricks that they made possible for reduce costs that we don't have multiple accounts. We didn't do that, by the way. I want to be and I mean it. We did this.
Does Alchemy provide debug dot trace transaction RPC call? So this is one, for example, where you can ask the VM for this particular transaction hash, give me a sequence of instructions that were executed, and at every step of the virtual machine, give me the stack and the memory. That's one thing that I think these web services, at least for individuals or small companies like me, they don't provide. Maybe if you guys had like a la carte deal with them, then maybe you got a better deal. The reason these services don't provide that service is these JSONs can be very large. They can be several megabytes, or I don't know, possibly even like many hundreds of megabytes, because they can.
I know to
have a very many. Yeah, if you have a lot,
I know to companies that do that.
Yeah.
There's Piteris, who's also in our channel, the Auditors channel. He actually built one, which is pretty cool, called Auditless.
How do you it's Piteris? How do you know him? Just from Twitter, from the internet sphere?
No, he actually was my buddy at Gauntlet. He was my double for the Gnosis safe and smart contract side of things. I work and build most of that, but anytime I was running into like a low level EVM question or any kind of like difficult question, he will go to.
By the way, Dominic, your comment Etna Labs is still showing for me. I wonder if that's something.
Oh yeah, that's the spirit of it. Yeah.
The other one is Tenderly, which is like pretty well known, and I think it's also free
at some point.
Really
I would just wish that like Tenderly would open source their software, but I guess that would be too ideal of world, you know.
Yeah. It comes very handy, Tenderly, and I used Auditless for the most when I was a Gauntlet, but I don't know if it's still running. I don't know how exactly it is, but Tenderly being free is probably the one that I've been using now. And also for these kind of questions, probably we could go in the channel and write, hey guys, I have this problem, and either you, Saša, or someone else might be already had.
I mean, I'm on a long-term mission to find a good local debugger or to build one, and I'm still exploring. So, there's a lot of things I want to try. I think the Forge debugger kind of sucks. So I want to try the Truffle one, maybe get it to work outside of Ganache. I want to try Tenderly, local CLI. Because it seems like you can also use it for local transactions on Ganache or Anvil. And if none of that works, then have a look at, So the Solidity team right now, they're trying to finalize the specification for a debug format. I think they got inspired by like the C language, which has like a unified debug format, and then other languages can hook into it. And they have this super ambitious plan for one format for all current and future EVM languages, which I think is pretty ambitious. With the new compile pipeline, they wanna integrate it with this format, and that would be a good opportunity for like debuggers to be really powerful.
Pardon my ignorance, but what is meant by debug format? Is that a format for like error messages, or like a format for the?
Yeah, I mean, again, I need to get into this more. I'm confused about it myself. So what I understood debugging means as of date is you have a transaction wherever. It could be Ganache or Anvil. It could be local. It could be public test network, or it could be public mainnet, right? Or a layer 2. So you have some kind of hash that represents a transaction. and you give it to the VM, and it gives you what I was talking about before, debug.trace transaction. So a list of JSON objects, and each one represents one instruction, one step of the VM, and every step of the way shows you the stack and the memory. I don't know if in Remix you've ever clicked the debug button. Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't stop there, right? So when you're auditing, when you're doing like, complex projects, you can't afford to go into that low level detail. You kind of need some higher level abstraction. So I just want to see three things. I just want to see Solidity local variables. Remix can do that. I think some other debuggers like Truffle can do that as well. I want to see. Go on.
Is this going to prevent? Okay, it's been like a little while since I've written Solidity, but what's that? The vague Solidity error message you get all the time? Like,
not sure. Transaction reverted, something like that.
Yeah, there's something.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing I want to see. I want to see Solidity local variables. I want to see. What was the other one? I want to see stepping through expressions and statements instead of EVM instructions, and I want to see story changes, full story changes, including mappings, which are not iterable by default. And those things, turns out, are very, very difficult. What I just said. So they require you not to only get the JSON.debug transaction. They require you not only to use Solidity's cryptic source mapping format to get the original code, but then you have to reverse engineer somehow and find which AST nodes that corresponds to. So you have to also have a look at the AST, right? So that you have information about your code. And then you can start operating on it. But all this stuff is really, really hard. And for example, the storage, the mapping stuff, it's really tricky because Solidity just puts in some bytecode, and it would be kind of hacky and bad design to kind of write a pattern that says every time this particular bytecode is present, then we interpret this stack element as a preimage. So I posted on their Discord saying, could you guys please provide us with some invariants about the Solidity compiler? And I listed 6 of them that are my hypotheses, and nobody responded to me. So I joined their call, and all this stuff is really hard. But all I hope is that we have 2 things. We have Solidity compiler and tooling around it that can agree on important invariants that everybody can agree on, and people.
Can you give an example? Can you give an example of what you mean by an invariant?
Yeah.
In this case.
Yeah. So I did this stuff like in December. So it will be much, much better if I just share my screen. So I think you guys can see my screen as of right now. So let's see if I can look this up. I'm going to share my browser history again. So let's try to go into Solidity forum. It's called. Okay, here it is. Yeah, so that post has much more details than I could ever think of right now on the spot. Let's try to log in with GitHub. Okay, I'm logged in. Yeah. Okay, so some of the things I want. So I called it the first Solidity debugger because, again, these features that I'm seeing now, I haven't seen any debugger have them. So I don't really consider everything I've tried in the 6 years that I've been in the industry to actually be Solidity debuggers. Anyways, so I listed 5 invariants here. So the order of this the order on the stack of arguments in an internal function call is the same as the Solidity parameters. So again, if you got this debug transaction JSON, and now you know that you're about to do a function call and you have 6 elements on the stack. Can you pair them up with the 6 parameters of the function? Nobody knows, right? Every tool builder is kind of doing these like heuristics and seeing what works. In order, actually, talking together. Yeah, instead of people talking together and agreeing, that these things should hold.
Well, I don't know if that would hold, because isn't the variable just bound to the parameter? And I feel like there might be some optimization, because like when you pack, it's been, like I said, it's been a while for me with Solidity, but like when you pack to struct, like there's an order you packed by like the like bigger ones first or something to make it more.
Yeah, so that's a bit different.
But I'm wondering,
stack elements just represent pointers. Yeah, the stack elements just represent pointers. But you do bring up an important point, which is debugging should ideally be as accessible as possible in production code as well, because we all want. So it's important for at least two user groups. It's important for people like Fed who deal with on-chain data for obvious reasons, because on-chain data usually runs optimizers, unfortunately. And it's important for auditors or people who run off-chain, data as well. Because, when I get a project, I don't really want to be doing a lot of edits to the source code. I don't want to be doing a lot of edits to the compiler settings. I just want to be running it in the way that they intend to do. And oftentimes when you turn off the optimizer, now suddenly the contract doesn't compile. Maybe it's above 24 kilobytes. A lot of things go wrong. So it kind of spirals into, you end up like testing a completely different piece than you're given. So debugging really needs a high priority because it is so important. It is so important, to not just for code to be fast, but to be understandable as well.
So does the Solidity compiler not have docs?
Not about these things, unfortunately, no. For a long time, they didn't even have AST docs. I don't even know if they do. Oh, I accidentally. I don't even know if they do yet. So all of this stuff, again, you kind of have to read existing tooling and then adapt it to your use case and hope that it works.
Have you talked with Pidarius about this? Because he literally built a debugger, so I'm sure he can talk with you more.
Not yet. We should invite him. We should invite him on the channel.
He's in the channel.
We should invite him for the next episode here in this room.
Oh yes, right, yes.
I thought I had nothing to talk about. It's probably too short, but maybe next time. I was actually accidentally ended up at Zuzalu in Montenegro. We
want to hear about that. Yes.
Pop-up, the pop-up nation state, as they're calling it, in Montenegro. So I don't know if you want me to get into that now or next time, because we've all.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Do you guys know what it is? Or maybe I should.
No,
say
and.
For
the only thing I know, I saw a few selfies with Vitalik.
Yeah.
And that's all I know. And I'm curious to understand more what it is.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not the best expert because I wasn't officially a resident. I live in Montenegro, not far from where Zuzalu is currently based. And I work in crypto. So I'm actually surprised I only heard about it a month ago. And my friend got a guest pass somehow. So I basically with the guest pass, I could just go in and out of the I want to say resort. They taught basically they say that they're in a part of Montenegro, a town, but it's literally a resort. It's a yacht resort. It's a gated.
Wait, so what's going on? I think I vaguely heard about this, but
do you know much about Balaji's network state, his thesis on network states and also that came out last year?
Yeah.
So this is an experiment in that. I think I haven't read the book, so maybe I wasn't preparing to even talk about this, but I think somewhere in his book he said that we should experiment with there's a lot of human gatherings that are short term, conferences. There are a lot of long term social gatherings cities and countries. And he was saying with network states we should sort of experiment with 2 to 3 month gatherings to see what kind of social interactions that facilitates. So that was the idea, to sort of bootstrap or start one of these network states with a 2-3 month residency in a physical location where everyone's living together for 2 to 3 months.
Isn't the problem with all of these sort of topics that we're just out of land? We don't have land that wouldn't be claimed by a country. Have you guys heard of Liberland, for example?
Yeah, that's also in the Balkans. That's what's funny. Just as someone that's from the Balkans, it's interesting that Zuzalu was in the Balkans and Liberland is also in the Balkans. And just before I forget, one of the most interesting things to me was seeing all these discussions that are kind of utopian. How do we bring all these people together? Blah, blah, blah. And and no one seemed to have understand the history of the Balkans and Yugoslavia and and stuff like that. So it's very ironic to watch all these kind of like, it's technical, but it borders on sort of like political discussions, philosophical discussions. And there was never like kind of a history of the region, just for some context, because a lot of this stuff has been tried in various ways.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be: are they trying to go a route like Liberland, where they set up autonomy and they actually declare themselves a new country? Because if you're under a nation state, then you're always going to be bound by its laws and taxes and regulations. So it's kind of like defeating the purpose, right?
I think, again, I feel bad speaking. I feel like I have a good intuition about Balaji's thesis about network states, even though I haven't read the book yet, just from interacting with these people. But I think the idea is that it's sort of like it's more Lindy. It's more anti-fragile, because it's like a network of people. Like, for people that don't work in crypto, I'm assuming everyone that's watching this probably works in crypto, but like, you don't realize as an outsider how interconnected everyone in crypto is. Like, everyone's like 2 degrees separated. Everyone goes to the same parties at conferences. It is almost like this, like, we haven't defined it, but it is a group of people that are like decentralized, but have like a sway, like have a strong voice in the world, like even politically, like even though we're not official.
Yeah. So here's
let me just
what I know.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, I think the idea with the network state is that I'm not a proponent. I'm just trying to speak objectively about the definition. Is that it's about this network of people that are mobile. Like, maybe they have some permanent physical land locations, but they're not tied to any nation state. It's like a very
the only thing that doesn't click with the nation state or with the network state, I suppose, is we just don't have land. That's the issue. It's a land issue. So the proposal for me to join the network state is to pay more taxes apart from the ones I have to pay in Czech Republic, and have more rules imposed on me. So there's no way for me to have less or even different laws and regulations, because I'm still bound by the laws and regulations of this country. So if I also join another startup network state, then by definition the taxes will only be higher, the regulation will only be more. So that's really where I think.
Well, the thesis Balaji, or the experiment Balaji is trying to run, is like, to start, the concept is like every state needs to have a land, a currency, a government. And what he suggests is that the land doesn't need to have a land, can be the internet. And then I read half of the book. I remember barely all the concept, but one idea is like that each of these network states eventually having capitals, they can buy land, and eventually they can create their own like an example is the UAE. They basically have a piece of land, and his concept is like we could get a land, someone in the desert or some remote place, and build like an island in there.
Yeah, like for sure. It really doesn't make sense to me that unless you're, as long as you're in a country that is not, the network state, then you're still bound by those laws and regulations. So, they could buy their own land and declare their own country. It's kind of missing the point of a network state. All I'm saying is, I don't see a future where I'm living in Czech Republic or living in the US and being part of a network state and not being part of, not having to pay US taxes and not having to abide to US laws. That's just not happening anytime soon.
Let me add one thing, because like I feel like it's such a vague concept now that I can't disprove you, but like one little piece, one of the, I think, defining elements of like Balaji's actual definition of a network state is that it's like, I don't remember the exact terminology, but that it's an influential group. And in terms of crypto, it's probably in terms of money, like, and knowledge. Like, so it's an influential group that other like legacy nation states will want to make deals with, or what's the proper not business term, make negotiations and work with,
like bilateral.
Yeah. Like, it's this powerful network of people that aren't tied to any state, but because they're powerful and influential, these legacy nation states.
It just sounds bogus to me. doesn't pass like basic like tests of logic. Like it seems to me that
Go ahead.
I doubt the Czech government would say, okay, you're part of this network state, therefore you don't have to abide by Czech laws. You can drink alcohol if you're 16 years old. I just don't see that happening.
It's like being recognized as like an entity, like not just like some Discord, like, oh, we're just people in a Discord. It's like, it's something that has like influence. And we've already seen that. I've seen it personally. So I never really read much about this network state stuff, but I'm going to now that I kind of saw what happened at Zuzalu, because Montenegro is a country of like 600,000 people. It's not part of the EU yet. And I don't want to start talking like politics and stuff like that, but like it's very, because it's a small country and it's not yet too tied to like any large, what would you call like something like the EU? Like basically Montenegro, like I actually saw politicians, like literally politicians at Zuzalu talking to these crypto people, talking about like how Montenegro can be more crypto friendly and bring in some of these people to actually come and live here. What kind of laws would facilitate that? And also, I saw those discussions and the results of those discussions. So like Montenegro I feel like is one of the countries in the world that something like this would be possible, because it's not a powerful country, but it sees this network of early Ethereum billionaires. I mean, it's not just about money, but it's these people that are well connected, a lot of people that are well respected, like Vitalik, a lot of money. And Montenegro wants to be like, how do we connect with you guys? So I've already seen this happen in Montenegro, where the Montenegrin government is very interested in having these kind of talks with this network state of Zuzalu.
Yeah, I think to expand on that, I think it's kind of like a trend that it's happening in many different ways. For example, I think Barbados came up with the first embassy in the metaverse. And so we're gonna see. Yeah, it's like last year when Meta announced like the metaverse.
I don't know, guys.
When there was like
seems like you're living on another planet than me. All I hear is AI regulation, crypto regulation, EU, US. Like I'm hearing a lot of. I
mean, I live in the Balkans. That's pretty much like a different planet. You could consider that a different planet with different rules.
I don't know. Like all I'm saying is, like small countries might be getting more liberal towards technologies, but it seems to me like the main places that matter, which is China, India, EU, and America, they're getting tighter on AI and on crypto. The EU AI Act, according to Reddit, I haven't read it, is actually forbids LLMs that are able to spread disinformation. So basically, all LLMs will be forbidden. And these are the policies that our policymakers are trying to pass, and I don't think they're great. So, what are your thoughts on that? You guys been looking into that?
Okay, I think the difference is I agree with you, but I'm just more optimistic. I think that's the main difference.
What's your position?
Yeah, on the network side, I'm definitely optimistic as well. Another example of like another attempt of network state that failed, but I think it failed because it started from the top going bottom, was DM, Facebook Libra. So basically Libra, what they were trying to do is Facebook already have, Facebook is a network state basically. The only thing they don't have is a currency.
Oh, and state. I mean, we're using the word state so liberally, it ceases to have any meaning. Define state if you consider Facebook a state. Is a state a relationship between human beings? Is that what it's all? In my opinion, a state is a monopoly on brute force. It's a monopoly on physical power. That's what a state is.
Yeah, I'll read to you the one sentence from the network state book. It says a network state is a highly aligned online community with a capacity for collective action that crowdfunds territory around the world and eventually gains diplomatic recognition from pre-existing states. One example is Facebook. I could argue that is already that, because I mean, you have an identity on Facebook. You have data. You have eventually government could start like accepting your Facebook ID at some point.
And also,
The actual government, the one that has the power to send police into your home and send a SWAT team, the actual government. There's still a huge distinction between it's the same discussion as with AI. I have the same exact position as with AI. So my position is the same on both. So let me try to explain. Until the AI has access to physical power, then it can never rule the world, right? Because you can always shut off the computer.
I have a great quote that oh my god, I literally tweeted it. Let me pull it up. It's about like, it's related to power isn't frick. Let me find it. Okay, where is it? Oh, here it is. And there is a way perhaps in which the world in the long run is more affected by legends than by the manipulation of power. Legends alter the way people think. This is on a higher level, if they are recorded, than that of power. So like having the power of information, the way information flows, like a lot of these big tech companies, like that's arguably, I think, being able to control the direction of information and what people think and believe is like a more powerful form of power.
I would want it to be true what you're saying, but have you guys been like I'll give you an example. How about the what was it called, the big I'm trying to remember. It was around 10 years ago or maybe 5 years ago. There was this big law around Facebook should not, or internet companies should not prioritize Facebook. Net neutrality. So you guys, if you go to any subreddit these days, the most top rated post on all subreddits on Reddit is still stop net neutrality. Everybody was for net neutrality, and still it got passed. So it just doesn't seem to me that that there is much correlation between what people think and what the government does in a lot of cases.
But are you saying like, okay, I feel like maybe this is going in too much of a weird direction, but like that's like I would extrapolate what you're saying to think that you believe that propaganda isn't effective.
What do you mean by propaganda?
Like the most classic example of like getting your citizens to support a war is by making your enemy, the devil, via various forms of media.
Yeah, I could even expand on that. I could even add to that, actually. For example, lobbying. I mean, eventually, if crypto becomes so big to be able to lobby the same way the NRA or other like healthcare do, and it's very possible that we can move in a direction that is like more philosophically close to our crypto ethos. I think there's a good chance that we'll see some of these experiments in the wild at some point. Like,
I think, okay, just to wrap up the whole discussion, I think if any of these options that people are exploring has the highest potential, and the one that has so far had by far the highest potential. So for example, we still haven't mentioned seasteading, that's another option. But the one that has by far had the most impact has been special economic zones, where you allow some area of land to not have the same tax and regulation as the government. That has been going on in UAE, in China, and a lot of other places. And that has, in the past decades, created an incredible amount of economic wealth. But it's all dependent on land, because until you have, it's never going to work any other way. I mean, even if the network state has its own army, it can't protect, and it decides to wage war with, for example, an existing state that has land somewhere, right? Because it's infringing on its own citizens' rights, who, for example, is there. It can never protect everybody around the whole world. So there's physical constraints in the physical world that just And we're not even talking about the fact that most of the externalities, most of the public goods are physically constrained, are based on physical location. But even if we're just talking about just the use of force, then that is then there's no way they can protect the whole world. So in my opinion, the states that are based on physical location will always have an upper hand.
Yes, but you know what? Think about like a Malta, or there's so many states that are so small that, or Switzerland, they don't even have an army. I mean, the way you deal with like a war in that case, you basically make alliance, and you make you make sure that you're not attacked. Simple as that. And
but that's a bit orthogonal, right? Because that's more of a game theoretic problem. What we're talking about now is we want everything. We want to both live in the US and we want to be part of a different country. I just think that's the only way that's possible is through special economics. But we'll see.
The concept of the network state is that actually you might even be just a network state citizen and not, and then being, I forget, there's a term for not being in any states in the world. I forget. There's a term that means that you have no,
you have no citizenship.
Yeah,
is it legal to revoke your citizenship if it's the last one you have? I think that also differs country.
No, actually, there's a movie called The Terminal where Tom Hanks basically goes in this airport and he gets stuck there and he lived there for 20 years, and it's a real story. So this guy, I think, was from the Balkan or some state that was like in war. He went to the airport. I forget which airport it was. And airports are like a neutral zone. And so he ended up living there because if he was going either way, he was being sent back, and he didn't have the citizenship to go back. And so there's actually these weird cases. But I think in the case of the network state, you potentially in the future have just a network state affiliation, but not other one. For example, I have an Italian one, Italian passport. I just got my American citizenship, so now I have two. So, and I think some other state might even allow to get even the third one, fourth one, whatever. But then you can renounce. I mean, I could renounce, I think, to either one if I want to. But there's no reason for me. But there's a way for you to like get just a network state at some point. And the only problem with that is no passport, like a non-network state passport will let you go anywhere. And then the other problem is, I guess, any country with a network state, with like a nation state, actually, not network state, with a nation state inside, I don't know, actually, like Liberland, how they keep like letting live what it is without problem. Because in Italy, there was another one called the Rose Island, I think. And it got
so the idea of Liberland,
there's many.
No. The idea of Liberland is pretty sound. It has a pretty sound justification. They looked at the official maps of the Serbian and Croatian governments. I think it's in between those countries, and they found a plot of land that neither of them claimed, right? And it's been a rule for that predates even human beings, that if you go to land and there's no one there and you're the first to use it and to make use of it and grow your food there, that it's yours, right? That's hundreds of thousands of years old ethics, and so that's what they did, and they founded a new country there.
Was it an oversight or was it like debated land? I feel like I should.
No. It was so I do think that there's some tension on that border, but all that matters from the Liberland perspective is there was land that was not being claimed and still isn't from either country, right? That's all that matters.
Yeah, what stops either one to claim the land and be like, put an army and be like, okay, I'll take this one.
Yeah, I mean, if they decide to, I hope nobody invades Liberland. I hope they can gain their influence, right? I mean, if I've come around in any way in this discussion, it's that it seems like this whole network state, I read about the idea, did research into it. It seemed like absolute bogus, but it seems like it's gaining the minds and inspiration and passion of a lot of people, a lot of smart and intelligent people. So maybe if I've come around in any way, it's that if for some reason this idea gains so much passion, so much inspiration that like actual physical land states decide to give some leeway to it, then it might have an influence. It's just hard for me to imagine that large places where people live, like China, US, or the EU, will make any leeways to some people on the internet, some subreddit anytime soon. But I could be around. So
no.
I hope.